everyone, and welcome to Petworking. I'm Peter Kenseth in the first ever episode of Petworking that I'm hosting without a beard. And happy to be back here today with Dr. Ben Hantler. Dr. Hantler was on
Couple of
in the
years.
first year of Petworking. He was one of our first guests, and we did an episode on at-home diagnostics when he was at Heska. In the time since then, Heska has been acquired by Antech. Dr. Hantler went on to work for Antech in their commercialization division for a while, helping to bring new diagnostics, other products to market. He did some work with their Rapid Read AI platform, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. We also, he since has moved on from Antech and has founded his own consulting practice called Consulting Medical Partners, and is really focused on expanding access to care in the vet space. And I think it's a hugely important issue. It's something we've talked about here on Petworking a lot. We founded the Angel Fund in part because of the access to care issues. And I'm really excited. We've been chatting a little bit the last couple weeks leading up to this episode. We've got some ideas. I made a post last week, talking about the lack of insurance adoption, the fact that we are putting pet parents in a position where they have to make a financial decision about their pet's health. If they don't have insurance, the costs of an emergency visit can be astronomical and they can be crippling for some families. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about the issues, what's driving access to care problems in the vet space, potential solutions that we see, and maybe we'll spill a few beans about some potential collaborations that we've been talking about. But without further ado, I will say welcome to Petworking. Welcome back to Petworking, Ben. It's great to have you. And tell us a little bit about your take on the situation. What's
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be back, Peter. Really happy. It's been too long, I think a couple years, but really happy to be talking about these topics today. And yeah, the broad sense that I see from veterinarians who are still practicing, my friends and colleagues, but even people in the industry, quote unquote industry, the people who supply veterinarians with all their tools, it's a little bit bittersweet, right? Things are going well at the moment, but under the surface, there could be a lot of problems brewing. And I think we've seen that in published reports from some of these companies, but even the veterinarians who are practicing probably see that in terms of their caseloads and the different responses they're getting from customers. So I think it's really good that we're talking about this, but other people are talking about it too.
Yeah, and I think what you're alluding to here is the fact that while revenues in vet practices are up, overall visits are down. And I think that this points, to a stark problem. It's indicative of a few things. One, the cost of veterinary care is outpacing inflation by a huge amount. Uh, I think we are looking at, a 41% increase in veterinary costs since
Oh, wow.
2020. And to me, that seems conservative. I've said this a number of times when I got Peony. It was January 2017, and it was $65 for a visit at my vet.
Yep.
And I'm sure people have seen she had a recurrence of some of her neurologic symptoms last week. I brought her to the vet, and great experience. I love my vet, but for a visit, an exam, and gabapentin and prednisone, I walked out with a $188 bill.
Right.
And yeah,
It's not uncommon. I was doing a little bit of background on pricing for various services, and it's not going to be indicative of the entire country or anywhere outside the US potentially. But in high population areas like New York City, I was hearing and seeing visit prices just to walk in the door for a physical exam, nothing else, of over $150 per pet. And that's just untenable. I know that cost of living is different in a lot of different places, but I don't care where you are. If you're spending $150 just to get your pet in, that's definitely a barrier.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks to the other half, right? Is that we have revenues up, but visits down. And the simple conclusion is that yes, clinics are charging more per visit, and fewer people are going to the vet because they can't afford those increased prices.
Right.
And um, there's a number of factors driving this, right? Like I'm not, and I think you'd be the first to agree with me that, the people who are working in this industry are doing it because they love animals. I don't think anybody gets into practicing veterinary medicine because they see themselves becoming a millionaire, or, they're taking on hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to go to vet school. You know, it, we're but there are factors at play.
Yes.
We see there are fewer and fewer people are electing to take on that debt. We are seeing a potential shortage of veterinarians. We are seeing people leave the profession because they're getting burnout. They're experiencing compassion fatigue. You can probably speak to that to some extent. You used to be a
Yes.
practicing veterinarian before you were at Heska. Um, we're also seeing, with these rising prices, it puts pet insurance companies in a difficult situation because there's no
Yes.
cap on the bills that they're being asked to pay, and it's not a tenable model.
Right.
We have factions of the ecosystem operating in almost complete isolation from each other. And if we're going to encourage more people to go to the vet, we need to make it affordable for them to go to the vet. So we're
Yeah.
not dealing with these situations where people are, you know, choosing to put down their animal or surrender their animal because they can't afford their care.
Yeah.
That's what drives the compassion fatigue and the moral distress and the burnout. So these are all really interrelated issues, but we're not, as an industry, we're not approaching it as interrelated problems. You have
Right.
vet clinics and vet chains operating in isolation from the pet insurance companies. You have,
Well,
yeah,
in the pressures, you're right. You're right, 100%. And all these different, I guess you call them silos, or they're different aspects of the industry. Um, Almost all, or maybe all of them, are leading with increasing pricing. So, and that's just the nature of the beast in a lot of ways, right? So if we're talking about suppliers, diagnostics, pharmaceuticals, those prices, they always go up, right? With inflation and other reasons. And some of those companies are publicly traded, so they're beholden to their shareholders. So that's a pressure. But then you also have, like you mentioned, the veterinary professionals, they have some of the hardest jobs, right, that we've seen. But a lot of what gets done as a remedy or proposed as a remedy to keep these people on longer is throwing money at them. And who pays for that in the end? It's going to be the consumer. The pet owner is going to be paying these salaries. But from my perspective and from some of the research that I've done, maybe you can comment on this too. It doesn't appear that just throwing money at vets or even veterinary technicians and nurses is all that effective at keeping them happy. It really is this work-life balance, and it's cyclical, right? Or it's circular in terms of, well, I'm not happy, throw money. Now the pet owners can't afford it, and I'm still not happy because you know what I mean? Like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah. I mean, off the top of my head, I don't have data. I would say, to say that there's retention or lack of it, but I mean, I think the statistic I can point to is that we're still looking at this veterinary shortage.
Right.
And that shortage is driven by the fact that you have fewer people entering into the profession,
Mhm.
and you have people who have been in the profession leaving the profession.
Yes.
Um, and so, yes, to me, that says that no, more money, while it's nice, isn't the solution. It can't be a singular solution to the problem,
Right.
right? I think, and I think that gets back to the fact that, and you can speak to this better than I can, but people don't become veterinarians
Right.
to make money. I mean, obviously they need to be paid for it, and they should be compensated well, and well compensated for the incredible work that they do. But I don't think, if the working conditions are such that they can't practice medicine the way they want to practice, if they're having to euthanize animals that they know they could treat, if they are being told that they have to see a certain number of patients every day, if they're being asked to take on too much in terms of practice management responsibilities, I'm sure you could go on and enumerate many, many, many more factors, but you know, if you don't have that sense of meaningful work and uh, I'm not saying everybody has to love their job every day, but if you go in and hate your job every day, eventually you're going to leave, right? There's only it is you spend, for the average person, you spend 40 hours a week, give or take, and I'm sure in the veterinary profession, sometimes a lot more. And if you don't love what you do, um, to put in that kind of time, regardless of how you're being compensated, if you are fundamentally unhappy and dissatisfied, the money's only, it can't be a panacea for forever.
Right.
And I mean, this brings me to, some of the stuff that we've talked about, because as I sit here and ruminate on and I understand all the reasons that this isn't happening, but
Mhm.
it it seems pretty simple to me that if we have a population where 4% of pet owners have pet insurance, and there's significant room to grow adoption of pet insurance. Um, and if we were able to do that, all of us, I mean, that's basic economics. If you get more people into the risk pool and contributing to the risk pool, all of a sudden insurance becomes a lot cheaper, right?
Right.
And they can cover, that's one half of it, right?
Yes.
You have more, and then you have more people going to the vet because they have insurance, and they're not looking at this as a cost avoidance model. We're not seeing this situation where revenues are up but visits are down. You'll see revenues up and visits up, and then maybe we can get some sort of price control into the clinic space. And there are some groups out there that are experimenting with various forms and factions of this. We've seen places like Modern Animal. They were recently acquired by Chewy, experimenting with a membership model. So, you're only,
Yep.
you pay a fixed fee per month, and that gets you unlimited vet visits. And then, your goods and your diagnostics and, um, you know, other consumables and, expenses within the context of the visit are billed, but you don't have to worry about just walking through the door. You can walk
Right.
through the door and get that answer. And, if you can't afford the recommended blood test or the recommended radiograph, at least you've talked to a vet, your pet's been seen, you leave with some peace of mind.
Sure. Another anecdote is a colleague of mine who's still practicing. He talked to me about one of the products, one of the things, the diagnostic products, and he said my pet owners are going to come to me and say, "Okay, that sounds great, but should I do that or should I do the heartworm test?" We want to get to a place where they can do both. And the other thing was a screening test, so it should be done. And like you said, the question is how do we increase the utilization of pet insurance? And I think it's on practicing veterinarians. I sometimes wish I still was one, so partially I could help with this. But it's really on practicing veterinarians and others in the industry to advocate as much as possible. And it's not necessarily picking a favorite pet insurance. I don't think you have to do that. If you have one as a vet or a nurse or anything like that, great. But there are so many out there, and some of them are struggling, some of them are doing well, that, like you said, if we increase the risk pools by increasing utilization, it's going to bring down costs for everybody, most likely.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other half of it is, there, if we think about it in terms of, just the way other types of insurance work, and, I pound this drum a lot, but I feel like I'm constantly reminding people of the fact that pet insurance is P and C insurance, and that it functions in exactly the same way that your car or home insurance does. And in addition to doing Maya's pet care and animal health practice, I also do our insurance practice. So I'm very familiar with how insurance works. And pet insurance is right in my ballpark. But like, if you think about, you know, what protects those insurance companies is the fact that virtually everybody is required to have car insurance. So they have a large risk pool. And then certain products and services are fairly standardized in terms of how they are priced. So if you get, if you bring your car to a body shop or a repair shop and you get a completely outlandish estimate, um, the insurance company will tell you to go somewhere else.
Right.
And that doesn't happen in veterinary medicine. There is no, and I understand it's going to fluctuate and vary based on geography and and things like that. I am sure veterinary services in the middle of out in the plains
Right.
of Wyoming, well, maybe not because there's probably a veterinary desert out there, but I am sure if you look at areas with lower costs of living versus New York, you're not seeing $150 for a vet visit. I know it here in Vermont, I'm paying probably around $100 for a vet visit. Um,
Right.
I'd have to look at my bill to see exactly what my exam charge was versus my medication charges. But even those medication charges can vary significantly.
Yes.
And you see different practices marking up different diagnostic products separately, it
Yeah.
different, it differently, even sometimes within the same ecosystem,
Yeah.
right? Depending on whether it's an independent franchise model or whether it's corporately owned and they're setting practices across the platform. I think you were mentioning there's some clinics out there that are marking up diagnostics 6x over what they're paying for them.
And it's a bit of a wild west. Yeah, there's not a lot of standardization. Some of these corporate practices will have standards. Are they met? Are they not? It's hard to say. And what you keyed on is another aspect of, I think, where the industry is kind of seeing some red flags of pet owners are seeing the value decrease as well. Even if they're in lower or higher cost of living areas, the price increases have been so stark that the value that they get for their care they perceive as less.
Right, right. Um, because yeah, I mean, if you're if you it's just incomplete, right? It doesn't. Yeah, okay. If I'm paying 100 or 150 or whatever it is to walk through that door,
Hmm.
and that doesn't include the cost of any diagnostics to definitively assess what's going on, or imaging to definitively assess what's going on, or a cytology report, or
Right. Nothing.
blood work, you name it. All of that is extra. And when we're billing on this nickel and dime a la carte model, yeah, I think people are dissatisfied, right? Particularly if you don't have pet insurance.
Yes.
It's I don't know how anyone does it. I mean, I now that she's older, I upped Peeny's deductible to $1,000. And I did that last year because my monthly premium jumped from $80 to $160 a month. And I
Yeah.
did the math out and I was like, if I raise the deductible from $200 to $1,000, my monthly payment goes back down to $60. And if I either way, I'm going to spend this amount of money. I mean, it was basically the same cost that I would have to spend, but at least the $1,000 was for things that I actually needed it for,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so you take that gamble of, okay, I'll take a little bit of a higher deductible. Um, this year, when the policy renewed, her monthly bill is now like 100 and something dollars, 110,
Mhm.
I want to say. So it did the doubling again, but she is almost 12. And, I understand, yes, the
Right.
actuarial tables show us that as dogs get older, they have more health issues.
Health problems.
We're
Yeah.
experiencing that right now. But I don't, I think when you look at it, I can budget and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to spend $1,200 a year on pet insurance, and I might have to spend another 1,000 on top of that in the deductible, plus 10% of whatever for my co-insurance. Um, and you can budget for that. And I'm not saying
Right.
everybody has to spend that amount, but I mean, there are simple things like accident and injury plans that cost a lot less than like illness plans. Um,
Yes.
and there are ways to go about it, but I mean, I
It's going to
very
become, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, very sadly, my Peony's circle of dog friends is, she's not the only one that's sick right now.
Yeah.
Her friend Bo swallowed the rib over Memorial Day, and thankfully, the emergency vet just kind of looked and didn't even charge my friend Erica for that. Said, I'm guessing with the stomach acid, it's gonna in his size, he's gonna be all
Sure.
right if it was one rib. Then another dog that comes and hangs out on our wine and karaoke nights sometimes. She's 15, and obviously at 15 you expect things, but she had a big health scare where she basically like couldn't get up for a couple days, and that was like a $5,000 that bill
Right.
for them. Um, my golf partner and good friend, his dog, they discovered he's been sick for a couple weeks and they were suspecting it might be Addison's or pancreatitis and his symptoms went away for a little bit and then came back this weekend. And Saturday night, they discovered a 5.5 centimeter mass in his small intestine. And he's only 6, so they're having surgery to take that out on, I think, tomorrow. Um, but
That's
that's gonna be a big
sensitive.
bill that he's looking at.
Very
And
much.
you know, I don't know how people like to me it just that's we're not making this system work for everybody,
Right.
right? And 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 by and large, like you've said, the people who are bearing the cost of this, both financially and emotionally, and psychologically, are the pets and pet parents.
Mm.
That's not a
But
winnable situation to me when I look, at what my friend is going through. It's like, of course, he's going to want to spend to save his dog. Um, at the same time, if you're looking at $5,000 to $10,000, like that's a key, that's not a place we can't keep saying that pets are family and
right.
encouraging the psychology of treating them like family and then not providing a means of treating them like family when it comes to medicine and when it
Right.
comes to being able to afford medicine. And I
Right.
know dogs are not the same thing as people, and I know our healthcare system has its own challenges, but at least we have a situation where if you are in need of medical services, you can walk into an emergency room, and most hospitals have that sign that if we provide services for
Exactly.
patients that can afford to pay, we must also provide services for
Right.
those that cannot. And no hospital is going to let somebody die on their doorstep because
Right.
they don't have insurance. And we require people to have insurance. Um, and most people have health insurance.
Right.
And I know there, maybe not people who watch this show, but I know there's going to be pushback of, oh, well, it's just a dog or it's just a cat. And maybe if you're looking at it and it's not yours and you can't find that compassion, um, to empathize and understand that everybody feels the same way about their pet that you probably do about yours. Maybe I can understand that, but it drives me crazy. I,
Yeah, and it's almost irrelevant because again, like there's parallels with the human health world industry, whatever you want to call it. There's a significant history that I won't get into. I don't even know that much about the history, but rising costs caused insurance exists in the human world because I can't pay. It's very expensive to do a lot of those things, MRIs, what surgeries. So we have to have some kind of mitigating tool, and now it's required. All these good things essentially happened in the human space. In the vet world, you're not going to see a lot of hospitals say, "Yeah, we'll see anybody." Even if you did, it still doesn't help mitigate that pool of, well, we need insurance numbers to tick up, but we don't have the people to buy it. How do we do that? I don't know. Well, it's going to come from the vets. It's going to come from the industry too, of trying to be forceful. And look, I think we're seeing it right now, right? Of the visits are declining because people can't afford care. If that percentage of people that are declining care, which is significant, as much as like 50% of people in certain areas are declining certain services, if those people had insurance, then at least some of that wouldn't be declined, right? It's not a good situation, I think, that the veterinary industry finds itself in at the moment, other than the fact that people see, well, hey, the line goes up, revenues are going up, so that must be good. And it is because people are using veterinarians. But if you get down deep, especially when you look at the pet insurance, like you mentioned, 4% incidence or something like that it's too low.
Yeah. And if we make pet ownership a, a privilege for the select few that can afford it,
Yeah,
ultimately the entire industry
collapse.
is going to collapse. I mean, the fundamental truism of pet has always been it's recession proof. No matter what, people will spend on their pets. People will take care of their pets. And you see it. I've seen it. I've seen Erica look at me in the driveway the other day and say, he's my baby, and I've got to do what I can to take care of him, even though I don't have pet insurance. I see what
Yeah,
my friend is doing and going through with his dog. I I you see people willing to spend, but they're, at what cost, right? And
right,
and
right,
are we really going to sit here and tell people to put themselves into financial ruin, or,
right.
uh, take on copious amounts of debt when there are other solutions out there? And I think a lot of it, at least from the pet insurance perspective, gets down to a lack of education. I was at a neighborhood barbecue this weekend, and I moved into a new house last August, so I'm still meeting, a lot of my neighbors for the first time. And uh, one of them, actually my next door neighbor, who I'd met several times, didn't know that I consult in the pet industry and that I run Petworking. And he's looking
Yeah,
at my shirt and saying, he's like, "Oh, and what's Petworking?" And we started talking, and pet insurance came up. And he was like, "Oh, really? And you have pet insurance?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. I have pet
yeah,
insurance." Like, I don't know how it's manageable for anybody if they don't have pet insurance. I mean, and maybe that's just my psychology. I would rather know what I'm a very insurance oriented person. I want to know that, you know, worst case scenario, I'm going to be out this amount of money and I have a backstop here. I also
sure.
know that I don't ever want to be in a situation where I'm thinking about Peony's care from a financial lens. I want to be able to make the best decision for her health. And I think that's how we all want to approach pet care. I think that's the way
The
vets want to
ideal.
approach it.
Yeah.
I think it's the way pet parents want to approach it. It's certainly the way we want to approach it for ourselves. In human medicine, is we want to make the best choice we can medically. Um,
Yes.
and I think when, but there's so much misinformation. I mean, my neighbor's concern was, "Oh, I just hear how bad it is and how there's so many, denied claims and how it doesn't work." And I hear that so often.
Yep.
And it's interesting to me because maybe I'm in the minority, but I've never had a problem
Yeah.
submitting a claim and getting it paid.
Yeah.
I think it's as simple as it's the same thing as your car insurance or your home insurance. You read the policy, you see
Yeah.
what's covered, you see what's excluded, you understand. Um, if you buy homeowners insurance and it tells you you're not covered in the event of a flood, you
Right.
understand if your house gets flooded that your insurance company isn't going to pay.
And
And
there, you're right. You're right. And there has been an evolution too. A decade ago, maybe I would agree with some of that of, well, they're declining claims and things like that, maybe in 15 years. But I think there has been an evolution in pet insurance. And again, I'm not advocating for any specific pet insurance here, but there are some that you're right, I've used myself or I've experienced as a vet that they were amazing experiences, paying out thousands of dollars per procedures that the pet needed, a back procedure or even healthy care. Some of these pet insurance companies offer wellness care that essentially will cover if your pet is healthy, it'll cover all of the fees for an entire year. So yes, you're paying a premium, you have a deductible, but it's not the same thing of, well, all that money went to nothing. No, you're getting your wellness, vaccines, physical exam paid for.
Yeah, and I think that's where the industry has struggled a little bit is that there isn't, the wellness plan is separate. And I've never had a wellness plan because I look at it, I'm like, I'm going to take her to get her vaccines and I'm going to
Mhm.
take her to, I'm going to refill the flea and tick prescription and the heartworm, medication.
Mhm.
So but I love the concept of wellness plans because it's something that's encouraging people to go to the vet, right?
Right,
And
right, right,
I,
right.
I think so much, and maybe another. I know we had talked a little bit about the importance of like at home diagnostics and solving this access to care issue.
Yeah,
It is just being aware and monitoring and understanding if there are issues, is your pet going through anything? Because I know, when we first had you on, 3 years ago, and we talked about preventive diagnostics, like
mhm, mhm.
a big problem that we see in the industry is that people don't get their pet to the vet often
Right,
enough. And this
right.
was 3 years ago. I think back then you said, 40% of pets don't make it to the vet every year. And if you're
Yeah.
not going to the vet every year, it's just like you or I not going and getting a physical every year. Like
Um,
stuff can creep up. All of a sudden, you find that you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol, or your cell counts are off, and they're indicative of an underlying condition that if you catch early, I don't care whether you're a dog, a cat, or a person, early treatment leads to your best outcomes. And
Right.
if you have people who, are getting their pet to the vet and the vet is keeping an eye on that pet's condition, you're not going to wind up in a situation where something has spiraled and become this huge problem.
Right.
Um,
That's the
but
hope.
in light of the fact that we are seeing rising costs in the clinic, I do kind of wonder, is
Yeah.
there a place for people who, for whatever reason, can't afford the cost of a vet visit to, augment
Mhm.
or, and I don't want to encourage people not to go to the vet, but at least if you're, there's
Right.
solutions out there. We've done episodes with Jaime Paris of Pronova,
Sure.
that
Yeah.
that could flag like, hey, this isn't right, or the wearables and
Yeah.
monitor getting baseline numbers on heart rates and respiratory rates and all those things. That even if you're not going to get pet insurance, even if you're not going to get a wellness plan and get your pet into the vet regularly, like we've got to be providing options so that people can understand
100%.
if there's something going wrong.
100%. And I guess I would, yes. So at-home diagnostics, it's kind of a misnomer because a lot of it's at-home sampling, whereas the diagnostics are done at a reference lab or somewhere else. The other avenue is telehealth, right, in general, of, well, there's fewer barriers to accessing telehealth. There's different regulations in all these states, but I am another kind of proponent of telehealth options and at-home diagnostics. Like you mentioned, if you can do something at home, especially when we're talking about cats or any animals that have difficulty going into the vet, just they're aggressive or they're fearful, getting samples at home is going to be so much easier than getting samples at the vet. And we're not talking about blood necessarily. I'm not asking pet owners to draw blood. Other than maybe a glucose check on the ear. Oh gosh, my camera. Other than a glucose check on the ear, we're not asking that. But getting a stool sample, getting a urine sample for a cat, and it doesn't mean like catching it. There's ways to get urine samples where it's not going to be too gross or dirty for the pet owner, and
Yeah,
that can
no,
be a huge thing.
we had QSM
Sure.
we did a segment with them on
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
at WVC
Sketched
a
it.
few
Yep.
years ago, and I love their WeWand is great.
Yeah.
Like you extend it out, and
Yep.
It's yeah, I think that fantastic innovation. And yeah, I when I first heard of like I think right around the time that we first talked, there
Mm.
was a new urine-based cancer detection test that was
Oh,
coming.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
I was like, how do you collect urine? Like that seems stool is one thing. I pick it up, put it in a bag, and I bring it in. But I was like, how? And I was very impressed when I talked to Edgar at WVC a few years ago,
Sure.
and he was kind enough. Peony was having another issue this past spring, and I had my wee wand, and I asked him, I was looking online, I couldn't find any uh, sponge samples, and I reached out to him and asked him
Yeah.
to send me one, and he was kind enough to overnight me one, and it was great, and it made it so
Gotcha.
much easier than, I had tried to rig up, when I couldn't find the the refill samples, I tried to like tape a cup to the wee wand,
It's
and
hard.
it did. She gets too low, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
she crouches right down to the ground. You need like that little, you know,
Well,
ability to get in under there like you're going under the to work on a car.
and it is like that. It's like an oil change. And you're right, like that type of innovation, I think, is what's going to help improve access. And you brought it up a second ago, and I don't know exactly what you did with the Fetch, QSM, Fetch DX, same thing. But it's not all of these at-home products or even the telehealth. They're not intended to cut out the veterinarian. So the pet owner is not, we're not expecting them as a vet or anybody in the industry to say, well, here's your wee wand, go get the urine sample. You're going to send that into us, and then boop, we're done. That's not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be in conjunction with a veterinarian in some way, whether that's through telehealth or through your own veterinarian. Those results will go back to your veterinarian, and it's supposed to help kind of build that community sense of, look, we're not trying to cut the vets out. I also don't want to put more pressure on the pet owner to do stuff. However, this is going to make everybody's lives better. It's going to be cheaper for you, pet owner. It's going to be cheaper for us because of the labor costs, etc., at the vet clinic. And guess what? We also get the best care possible for your pet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea to match this uh, with a telehealth solution, right?
Mhm.
Um, you know, I don't know, I in the unit economics in terms of paying vets and making sure that they're fairly compensated and things like that, but I think you can also like if you have a membership model and you
Yeah.
charge people a nominal fee, and again, it's sort of like the insurance and the risk pool, and a lot of pet insurance companies offer access to telehealth as part of the pet insurance
They do.
package.
Hmm.
And if we have this ability, we do telehealth with ourselves. I know there's a lot around VCPR and
Yeah.
being able to diagnose and prescribe without having gotten your hands on the patient in some states, but hopefully we're moving towards a model where people recognize like that needs to change because
Yeah.
if we're in an age of remote work and virtual meetings, and you and I are chatting on Zoom right now, and we wouldn't have done this 6, 7 years
Right.
ago. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
COVID changed a lot in terms of
Did.
how we do things virtually. And,
Yeah.
I think if you could have that, just as like a frontline triage of, you
Right.
know, let's talk to the vet. We have some at-home diagnostic options.
Let's
We
send
can
it to you.
get
Yeah.
these samples at a lower cost. We can get, at least a conversation going around what might be happening with your pet at a lower cost. And if there's really the need to get them into the clinic, we can
Right.
cross that bridge when we get to it. And hopefully we get that awareness of pet insurance and adoption of pet insurance up. But I think it's a conversation people need to be having because right now, I think my personal, and I don't have anything but anecdotal evidence to support this, but I think for the people who, because adoption of pet insurance is so low, I think
Hmm.
a lot of the perspectives about it out there in the market are from people who have gotten it as a part of a voluntary benefit program at work.
Yes.
and they
Right.
probably don't read the policy language and they just say, great, I have pet insurance now, and they sign up. And maybe they have a 5 or 6 year old pet and it's had some issues, and then they go in and they try to get it treated and claims get denied, and they get frustrated, and rightfully and justifiably so. I think if we're gonna, if we're gonna push pet insurance on people, as a voluntary benefit, you've got to be willing to waive that pre-existing condition requirement. There's like, I
Like you,
again,
yeah,
I think we there are paths forward here. I don't want
100%.
to say that we're sitting here and just describing the problems, but there are
No.
problems. We're witnessing them.
Yeah.
We're seeing
Well,
500,000 pets a year put down because pet parents can't afford treatment, and it's economic euthanasia, and nobody really likes to talk about it, but it's happening. And we're
oh,
seeing vets get burnout. We're seeing vets leave the profession. We're seeing vets dealing with serious mental health challenges and
very serious.
in
Yeah.
suicide. And it again, nobody likes to talk about it, but if we don't
We have
talk
to.
about it and bring it up and make people aware that the way the system is currently functioning is having some serious consequences, not just for pet parents, not just for pets, but for vets as well. Um,
Yes. The entire
it's not
ecosystem. Go ahead.
it's not going to change.
No, and like you said, education, I think, is a specific gap that I'm trying, as a independent consultant, any company that comes to me, whether it's anybody, that's what I would try to do is help with education because especially when we're talking about pet insurance, like you brought up, there are huge gaps in knowledge that can be addressed maybe easily. If it's not easily, they can certainly be addressed. And there's different ways to do that. And maybe even outside of the pet insurance ecosystem, right? Diagnostic companies would benefit from higher incidence or higher utilization of pet insurance. So would the clinical groups, et cetera. So there are ways to work together.
Yeah, no, there definitely are. There definitely are. And I know I've mentioned this to you, and hopefully we'll be uh, doing and having more conversations like this in the future. But when I started the Angel Fund, I didn't, I saw the problems, and I said, this is what I can do personally in the meantime, because all of this, like I said, it's something I'm very passionate about. It's something I care about a lot, and
Admirable.
and even if we're just helping one pet, and we've only helped one pet so far, but hopefully we'll help more. But I think it's
Right.
also the value of that fund is to help facilitate these conversations, and
Yes.
and bring both pet parents and vets and corporations to the table to,
Yeah.
look at a lot, where can we be, because this is an issue that affects everybody in some form or fashion, right? It's affecting the 500,000 pets that are losing their lives because of financial reasons. It's affecting the owners of those pets. It's affecting the vets that have to put them down. And there are companies in this industry that have solutions to these problems, like I want to make this fund a vehicle to educate people about pet insurance, to hopefully
Yeah.
drive up pet insurance adoption, to, talk about the benefits of at-home diagnostics and regularly monitoring your pet's health, and talk about the need to be a responsible pet parent, and keep tabs on these things so that we're not getting into a situation where, you know, you're going to feel bad and your pet is going to suffer, and then the
Right.
vet that
Mm.
you should be working with is suffering because of
Right.
you know because you didn't get the proper education around how often you need to bring your pet to the vet, or annual wellness visits, or keeping them up to date on heartworm and flea and tick, and their other vaccines. There are ways to do this, and there are free vaccine clinics.
Yeah. Low
This
cost.
this this if everybody starts pulling together in this, I don't think it's an insurmountable challenge. I know we've got a
I agree.
lot going on in our world today, and
We didn't even
It's
talk about like fuel prices causing increase in, or tariffs, because a lot of these products that reach the veterinarian shelves are from made abroad, right? So there's so much that we can work on. Yeah.
yeah, but you have to start somewhere,
Yeah.
and sometimes starting small and doing something is better than just sitting back and uh, you know throwing our hands in the air and bemoaning the current situation. And uh,
Even just
I
talking about it, right? This podcast, I think, does a lot of work, and just verbalizing this with others in the industry, I think will help us out of this little mini rut that I see that we're in.
Yeah, and I hope it does. And I hope for people listening today, this is you know, not only raises awareness and calls attention to the issues, but gets people's minds thinking about possible paths forward
Yeah,
and
right.
how we can adapt and change and evolve. Because I think, we all do want what's best for our pets. I think that is a universal truism.
Yes.
And, it like in everything, we may have different opinions on how best to get there, and people may have their own economic interests related to the what they see as the best solution. But if we don't have the conversations and we don't, acknowledge that where we're at right now probably isn't the ideal, it doesn't help any of us going forward.
Right. Yeah, agreed. The status quo, in my opinion, and it sounds like yours as well, it's not maintainable right now. So having these discussions, as smart as you and I are, and you're smarter than me, I'm not that smart. There's other people out there, hopefully that are listening, or just, that we're connected to, anybody in the industry, that these people can help us figure out the solutions, because there's no way that you and I will have every solution or even half of all the solutions. So the discussions and education are so important.
Yeah, it's not something that anybody can solve alone. And, that's a big part of why I have this podcast is, I'm I'm eternally grateful for everything that Peony has given me in the 9.5 years we're together. I recognize I've been incredibly fortunate to have pet insurance and to have been aware of pet insurance. I feel very privileged and lucky to have worked in the industry, to have had my first project consulting in the pet space be about pet insurance
Yeah.
before I even got Peony. But, because I have had that, it's allowed me, I have never once questioned whether it was a good idea to bring Peony to the vet
Same.
or, you know, just for peace of mind. And I can guarantee you that if I was operating on a cost avoidance model, Peony would not be here today. I
Yeah,
wouldn't have caught the
guaranteed.
melanoma that I got when she was 5.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have caught the misdiagnosed heartworm negative.
Yeah.
When we adopted her,
Right.
back in 2017, we adopted her. They said, she's heartworm negative. The test had been administered when the microfilaria were too small, and it was only because we thought she pulled the groin muscle, and the vet did a snap test about 3 months after we got her that we learned she had heartworm. That goes another 6 months, she's probably dead. That it wouldn't have been made sense to do the imiticide. It would, she
Right.
would have, if you don't catch it, like, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's it's why I'm so passionate about pet insurance. It's why I'm such a big advocate for pet insurance, because I know the value uh, that Peony has brought to my life. You cannot
Yeah.
discount the power of the human animal bond. You can't discount the mental health benefits that people derive from having a pet. And I think our pets feel it too. I mean, it's a
Oh, yeah.
truly beautiful symbiotic relationship, but like I really can't imagine my life without Peony, but I also know that I would not have had half the experiences that I've had with her in the last almost 10 years if I didn't have pet insurance and I had operated on the principle of if I'm worried about something, I'm checking it out with my vet. Um,
Yep.
as a
Same. No,
first time
it's
pet owner, I wouldn't, and even as a seasoned pet owner now, like I'm not a veterinarian. I know enough to be dangerous, but like I don't,
well,
I didn't go to
I
school for it.
Sure. No, I mean, my fiance and I are both in the veterinary field, but our kitty, and she's a cat, where you see much lower utilization on pet insurance. But we thought it was a good idea because she doesn't go outside or anything like that. But she's a cat. What if she eats something? They love to eat stuff. They love to chew on things. And that type of surgery, if she ever got into that situation, would be very expensive. So it's even though, the focus of improving access isn't just on insurance, I think it is such a primary focus on at least making a dent in access or improving access and affordability. Is if that insurance utilization number goes from 4% to 15%, you're going to see huge differences.
Yeah. No, it would be night and day. I mean, if you think about that, that is three times as many people with
Right.
pet insurance. And, you know, and I think once you reach a point of critical mass where it people are starting to see like, oh, this is out there, this is a thing, this is mainstream, and the question and the conversation isn't like the one I had at the barbecue on Sunday afternoon of, oh,
Right.
you have pet insurance. Um,
So which
it
one do you have? Something like
Yeah,
that.
it
Yeah, I
becomes
know.
of course you have pet insurance, and we probably should have pet insurance. Um, yeah, I think you start seeing it more in the mainstream media, mainstream
Yeah.
advertising.
Yeah.
Uh, how many, you can't turn on a TV these days without seeing a Progressive or Geico commercial for,
It's
auto
true.
and home insurance. Let's make that the case with pet. There.
There's so many, yeah, and that's I guess that's the optimistic, or that's why I'm optimistic too, is there are so many ways, just in brief thought, that could potentially fix it. So again, all the other smart people around us thinking of other ways, that there definitely are good ideas on how to increase utilization. I think you have some yourself, but then making it materialize, making these things happen. That's, I think, going to be the question, right? The tactics and how we execution.
Exactly. Yeah. Innovate. It you see it. I know Odie Pet Insurance and Purina have a
Yeah.
partnership where,
Hmm.
Odie and the Pitivity suite
Yeah.
work together, and it's part of the wellness plan, and so they're getting their at-home diagnostics out, the smart scales, the wearables,
Oh, yeah. The wearables. Yeah.
and and as an insurer, they're seeing a benefit in that. And I think, like, if we can evolve beyond this,
Stigma.
stigma, and I guess the fundamental problem that I talk about all the time is that we're trying to make a health insurance product in a P&C
Yeah.
insurance ecosystem.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, I know we could probably go on all day, but I'll leave it. And we've also talked about that the idea of potentially creating. I know the Paws Act a couple of years ago talked about making pet health related expenses, veterinary expenses, uh, part of like an HSA or
Yeah.
tax free, right? And that
Right.
would be
Right.
another way. I don't know that it would wholly solve the problem because it's not
No.
going to necessarily put a
No.
cap on cost, but it would at least free up more money for people to, be
Right.
able to spend on getting their pets to the vet.
Eh, Yeah, and it incentivizes some of these corporations. They see the interest and they're like, well, okay, if we can help the industry, help ourselves and help the industry at the same time, maybe they would. Some of these banks would open up these accounts, just again, improving access to care.
Again, yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully the next time we talk, we'll see the numbers
Yes,
slightly different. We'll
I hope
see
so.
revenues up and visits up, and hopefully the
Fingers
revenues will
crossed.
be driven by increased visits and increased utilization and giving more people access to care in the
Agreed.
veterinary arena. But
Agreed.
I like to take an optimistic outlook with things. I know there's problems out there, but I'll say again, if all you do is complain about the problems and you don't look for solutions, it's a pretty bleak world to live in. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
excited to have
imagine.
conversations like this with you. I'm excited to work
Likewise.
on possible solutions, and hopefully other
Likewise.
people who listen today were inspired as well.
I hope so. Thanks so much for having me, Peter. It was always great to chat with you. I'm happy to do this anytime, and I guess I'll leave one final message. Go Spurs, go.
They got a game back for you last night,
One
right?
line. We got one.
There you go. Hey, I think we all want to see a 7 game series.
Oh God, my
I'm a
heart can't
Celtics
take it.
fan. Uh,
Okay.
So,
Go
so I don't
Spurs.
know.
Yeah.
But I also know what Knicks fans are going through, having been a fan of the Red Sox, being
Oh
a Red
yeah.
Sox fan. I remember what it
Cursed.
felt like in '04. I
Yeah,
remember what it
more than
felt like
50.
when the yeah, I think it was 72 or 70 was their
80.
last
It
title.
was so many years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they have not won a title in my lifetime, and I know they've had their share of heartbreak, but I also think the Spurs are a very exciting team, and you have a very promising future with Wemby. So yeah,
Indeed.
I'm just enjoying watching good basketball.
Same. I hope both teams have fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know you're a big Spurs fan, so I as I there you go. As I watch, I will be thinking of you, and
Appreciate that.
we'll have to see how the series plays out. But on that note, everyone, we'll leave you with these thoughts. And on behalf of Ben, this is Peter Kenseth with Petworking. Everyone, thanks for taking the time to listen, and look forward to driving change in the future. Take care, all.